Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reality Vibes, when facts speak louder than feelings, and we don't apologize for common sense. Today, we are taking a deep dive into how disease, identity, and culture intersect, not from the usual emotional or ideological angles, but with clarity, data, and yes, personal reflection. The COVID-19 pandemic didn't just test our hospitals, it tested our values, our systems, and our ability to think critically. Let's break it down. We tend to think of disease as either a random lightning bolt from nature or something locked deep in our genetic code. COVID-19 shattered both of those ideas. It made clear that while a virus may be biological, the way it spreads, how it hits hardest, and how people respond to it, those are social. Anthropologists use the term social determinants of health to describe how factors like income, race, housing, and work conditions shape a person's likelihood of getting sick. During COVID, you could see that play out in real time. Grocery workers and hospital staff couldn't stay home. Tech workers like me could. Some communities lived 10 people in one apartment. Others fled to vacation homes. That's not just economics, that's anthropology too. And when these structural patterns of inequality create real harm or risk, we call it structural violence. That's when harm doesn't come from a fist or a gun, but from the way society is set up. So let me do what this assignment actually asked. Reflect on how my identity shaped my exposure to COVID-19 and what that really meant day to day. If I have to reflect on how COVID-19 impacted me personally, as this assignment requires, I want to be blunt. It was not just about infection risks. It was about losing control of my career, my voice, and my identity under the weight of politics and manipulation. At the time the COVID-19 pandemic hit, I was working as a software developer, a career built on merit, discipline, and constant self-education. Like many Americans, I was forced to work remotely when the lockdowns began. I adapted, as always, but later, the project I was part of got stripped away, handed to a new team led by a cheaper foreign developer on H-1B visa, with promises that they could deliver the same quality for less. Spoiler alert, they couldn't. But greed spoke louder than loyalty. Our beautiful project was taken away, and many of us were laid off. That wasn't biology, that was economic displacement by globalist policy. When I got another job as a backend developer, I made a mistake of using my own Facebook account during an internal task related to social media advertising integration. That small slip revealed my real identity, and soon after, my Republican views. I wasn't one of them. I wasn't liberal. That's when the Cold War started. Collaboration vanished. Slack messages dry up. Snide remarks show up in meetings. Eventually, I was forced out, not for performance, but for not being one of them. This isn't paranoia. It's a widely known fact in the tech world. Once liberal coworkers discover your politics, your career is on borrowed time. That's the real social determinant nobody wants to talk about. Not race, not class, by ideological conformity, especially during COVID-19. And this is where ideological violence during COVID enters. It's a term we don't often use, but it's real. If your job security depends not just on what you do, but also on what you believe in, that's not just bias, that's systemic control. And let's also not forget the psychological toll that these authoritarian policies took on Americans. The mental and physical health fallout was not incidental. It was baked into the enforcement mechanism of the COVID regime. We were told where we could go, when we could leave our homes, and how many people we were allowed to see, even during religious holidays like Easter. Police broke up church services. Tip lines were set up encouraging neighbors to snitch on each other.
Hello, you have reached the Department of Public Safety stay-at-home hotline. The information you leave is considered public information. At the tone, please leave the following information: your name, your callback number, how the stay-at-home order is being violated, and where the stay-at-home order was violated. Thank you.
Vaccine passports became the new form of social permission. Parents who questioned school mandates were labeled domestic threats. Toddlers were forced to wear masks in preschools. People were doxxed for political donations. Conservative voices were monitored by the FBI. Some left-wing pundits even floated ideas of re-education camps for Trump supporters. And while conservative Americans were pushing to protect kids from sexualized content in school libraries during COVID, we were accused of banning history books. The reality? One side was protecting childhood innocence. The other side was gaslighting the country into a mental breakdown. These weren't just policies during COVID. These were forms of structured violence, psychological and societal stressors inflicted in the name of public health, but executed through fear, shame, surveillance, and exclusion by the state and their lackeys. Anthropology has terms for this: biopower, ethnographic trauma, and institutional harm. And while the whole country suffered, it was the half of America that resisted the Biden-Fauci COVID regime, the non-compliant half that took the hardest hits. Our stress levels rose. Our jobs were threatened. Our families were divided. Our churches were shattered. The very people who preached tolerance turned into enforcers, and we were the targets. Let's also not forget those who served on the front lines during the COVID-19 pandemic, not only in hospitals, but also in uniform. Thousands of nurses and healthcare workers were forced to get vaccinated against COVID or lose their jobs, regardless of medical concerns or religious beliefs. This wasn't informed consent, it was biopolitical coercion, a concept explored in medical anthropology, where the state exerts control over individual bodies in the name of public safety. Brave men and women in the US military, patriots who had volunteered to defend the Constitution, were told, comply with COVID vaccine mandates or be discharged. By early 2023, over 8,000 servicemen members have been involuntarily separated from duty for refusing the COVID shot. These weren't criminals. These weren't deserters. They were Americans betrayed by their own fellow citizens, citizens who acted less like neighbors and more like existential enemies. Anthropology has terms for this too. Scholars will describe it as a form of ritualized obedience when institutions enforce symbolic actions like COVID vaccination to signal loyalty and political alignment, not just public safety. When medical authority becomes inseparable from ideological purity and dissent is punished instead of evaluated, we move beyond health and into the realm of authoritarian biopower, a concept in anthropology and sociology describing institutional control disguised as care. When COVID coercion replaces COVID conversation, when loyalty to science is reduced to loyalty to political narrative, and when moral autonomy is crushed under the weight of state-mandated protocol, that's not just flawed pandemic response. From an anthropological perspective, that's structural domination with a biomedical face. So no, COVID didn't just challenge my lungs, it challenged my right to exist in a professional space as a conservative, as an actual thinker, as someone who believes biology matters more than slogans. And here's the part people don't like to talk about: how public health became political theater. Masks mandates, curfews, school closures. These weren't just safety measures, they were tools of compliance. As our beloved Congressman Steve Scalise put in 2022, he said, "We cause more harm than we prevent if we prioritize COVID restrictions over learning how to live." He was right. The CDC changed its guidance based on polling. Teachers' unions held districts hostage. Liberal elites broke the very rules they imposed. That's not science, that's theater. And people like me, we were punished, not for spreading disease, but for spreading doubt. Now, let's get academic again for a moment. In anthropology, we often talk about ethnotheology, how different cultures explain illness. In some West African traditions, for example, illness is caused by spiritual imbalance or ancestral displeasure. That's ethnoetiology. But here in liberal academia, a new form has taken hold: the idea that illness is caused by oppression alone. Yes, it's true that race, class, and identity affect exposure, but that doesn't mean biology disappears. It means that biology and society interact. As medical anthropologist Paul Farmer emphasized, structural violence shapes who gets sick and who gets treated. Nancy Shepherd Hughes added that suffering is often rendered invisible by bureaucracy and institutional neglect. During COVID, minority communities in crowded housing were more exposed, but so were working-class whites in rural hospitals, forgotten towns, and manufacturing plants. You didn't have to be oppressed, you just had to be expendable. And now let's briefly address a key statement from the video prompt for this assignment. It says, "There is no white gene, there is no black gene. There is no single gene for race, just like there is no single gene for hate. But genetics does correlate with ancestry, and ancestry correlates with biological traits. That's why DNA tests can tell if your roots are in Ireland or Nigeria. That's molecular anthropology, not white supremacy." The biomedical model, which drives modern medicine, depends on this. We know that sickle cell anemia is more common among people with West African ancestry. We also know that cystic fibrosis disproportionately affects people of European descent. This isn't racist, it's responsible. But in many liberal classrooms, acknowledging this truth is treated as taboo. The irony? They erase biology in the name of equity, but end up blinding students to the very knowledge that could save lives. So let's bring it full circle. COVID-19 didn't hit everyone equally, not because the virus is racist, but because society isn't neutral. Some people had the luxury of remote work, others work in meatpacking plants, delivery routes, or crowded hospitals. Some students had Wi-Fi, iPads, and quiet homes. Others instead had noise, neglect, or no internet at all. That's what anthropology should study: how identity, power, and infrastructure shape risk. But it should also do so without erasing science, without turning every discussion into a morality play, and without forcing students to parrot ideology just to pass. I don't want a classroom where we pretend race has no biology grounding. I want a classroom where we say ancestry matters, but so does inequality. DNA matters, but so does housing. Biology is real, but so is social structure. That's real anthropology. When I reflect on COVID and how it intersected with my identity, the picture is clear. I was punished not by a virus, but by a system that values ideology over merit, appearance over performance, and slogans over science. This is structural violence too, and no one wants to talk about it. So let's stop letting bad faith arguments hide behind academic titles. Let's stop pretending that truth is offensive, and let's start rebuilding a culture where we respect biology, question ideology, and never surrender reality just because someone in a university said so. And that's all for today, folks. You have been watching Reality Vibes, where facts speak louder than feelings. Take care of yourself. Stay sharp, stay free, and above all, stay real. Thanks for watching, and good night.